You know, there are moments in American politics that don't make the front page for weeks, but they should. They should sit on the front page and stay there until every voter in this country has had a chance to look at what just happened and ask themselves one question: is this really the standard we're willing to accept from the people we send to the United States Senate? Because last night, in a small opera house in Newberry, South Carolina, something happened during a debate that I believe every American ought to pay close attention to. And I don't say that to be dramatic. I say that because what we saw wasn't just a bad debate moment. It was a window into something much deeper. A question about whether we still care about competence in the people who make life and death decisions on our behalf. And I want to walk through this with you, step by step, because the details here matter more than the headlines are letting on. Now let me set the scene for you. Senator Lindsey Graham, and I want to be clear, Lindsey and I didn't agree on much, but nobody could deny the man knew foreign policy. Lindsey passed away suddenly on July 11th at the age of 71. That's a real loss for the Senate, regardless of your politics. Within 2 days, South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster appointed Lindsey's sister, Darlene Graham, to serve out the rest of his term. President Trump endorsed her. She'd never held elected office a day in her life. And I want to be fair here. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you need prior experience to serve. Some of our finest public servants came from outside politics. But here's the thing you have to understand, and we'll come back to this in a moment. Being new to office doesn't exempt you from the basic responsibilities that come with the job. Not when you're one of 100 people in the most powerful legislative body in the world. Not when 23 million people on an island called Taiwan are looking to the United States Senate to understand whether America will stand with them. So here's what happened last night. The debate moderator, Greta Van Susteren, and Greta's been doing this a long time. She knows how to ask a straightforward question. She looked at Senator Graham and asked her plainly, are Taiwan and the South China Sea national security issues for the United States? If so, why? Now that's not a trick question. That's not a gotcha. That is the most basic foreign policy question you could ask any sitting United States senator. Taiwan is a democracy of 23 million people. China has never controlled it, but has vowed to take it by force if necessary. The semiconductor chips manufactured in Taiwan power virtually every piece of technology in your home, your car, your hospital. The South China Sea is one of the most strategically vital waterways on Earth. This is not obscure. This is fundamental. And Senator Graham asked the moderator to repeat the question. And then she said, and I want you to hear these words exactly. She said, I'm just going to be honest here. I'm not that informed on national security, but I do support the military. She mentioned her brother served in the Air Force and her father in the Army. And then she said it again. National security is not my thing, not my area of expertise, but I do support the military. Now, I want to stop here and do something I think is important. I want to acknowledge the strongest argument her supporters would make. They'd say, and they'd be partly right, that Darlene Graham has been honest. She didn't try to bluff her way through it. She admitted what she didn't know. And in a political culture where people lie through their teeth on a debate stage every single night, there is something to be said for candor. I'll give her that. I've been in enough rooms with enough politicians to know that the ones who fake it are often more dangerous than the ones who admit what they don't know. But here's where I have to part ways with that argument, and I hope you'll follow my thinking on this. Honesty about your limitations is a virtue when you're asking for advice. It is not a virtue when you are already sitting in the seat. She's not applying for an internship. She is a sitting United States Senator. She has already been casting votes. She is already part of the body that confirms generals, approves treaties, authorizes military force, and sets the foreign policy posture of the most powerful nation on earth. And if you're sitting in that seat and your answer to whether Taiwan matters is, "That's not my thing," well, that tells me something about the process that put you there, not just about you. And I want you to think about that, because I care about the people who watch this. And I know most of you take this stuff seriously. You want to understand what's actually happening in your country, not just the cable version of it. If you're not already reading the Bluebill newsletter, I'm telling you right now, you are missing the full picture. 5 minutes a day, it lays out the details, specific numbers, specific timelines, things cable doesn't have time to dig into. Go check the Bluebill newsletter. That's why I'm telling you. Let me tell you something from experience. When I was sitting in the Oval Office, every single morning started with a national security briefing. Every morning. And the people in those briefings, my Secretary of State, my Secretary of Defense, my National Security Advisor, they didn't get those jobs because they were related to someone who held a job before them. They got those jobs because they had spent decades building the knowledge required to protect 300 million Americans. And I'll tell you this, when a crisis hits, and it always does, there is no time to learn on the job. When the phone rings at 2 a.m. and someone tells you there are Chinese naval vessels approaching Taiwanese waters, you don't get to say, "That's not my thing." You have to know. You have to be ready. And the Senate, the United States Senate, is the last line of institutional defense before a president makes a decision that could send American sons and daughters into harm's way. If the people in that body don't understand the stakes, the system doesn't have a check on it. That's how it works. And this is where things start to get more complicated, because this isn't just about one person having a bad night on a debate stage. This is about a pattern. Look at how Senator Graham was placed in that seat. Lindsey Graham dies on July 11th. 2 days later, Governor McMaster appoints his sister. President Trump endorses her within the week. She launches her campaign days after her brother's funeral. The Republican establishment lines up behind her. 10 candidates run in the primary. She gets the most votes at about 33%, not enough to win outright. She's now in a runoff against Congressman Ralph Norman, set for August 25th. And here's the part that should concern every voter in this country, regardless of party. The reason Darlene Graham is in this position has very little to do with what she knows and almost everything to do with who she's connected to. That is loyalty over confidence. And I've seen that calculation destroy institutions from the inside. You don't even know it's happening until the moment you need the institution to function, and it can't. You're not going to find the real breakdown of how this appointment happened on any cable network. They don't have time to dig into the numbers, the timeline, the campaign finance transfers. The Blue Bill newsletter had this with details you didn't even know existed. Specific figures, specific dates, the mechanics of how Lindsey Graham's campaign funds moved, the endorsement timeline. If you want to stay ahead of what's happening here, the people reading it right now are not caught off guard by any of this. Go read the Blue Bill newsletter. Now let me talk about what this means going forward, because I think that's what matters most. Senator Graham also said during this debate that she fully trusts President Trump on Iran, on China, on every foreign policy question that came up. She deferred to the president on every single issue. And she also told reporters after the debate that South Carolinians are worried about their pocketbooks more than they're worried about the South China Sea. And I understand that instinct. Kitchen table issues matter. But a United States senator doesn't get to choose between caring about groceries and caring about whether China invades Taiwan. You have to do both. That's the job. And when you defer every question to the president, when you say, I trust whatever the president decides, you are not serving as a senator. You are serving as a rubber stamp. And the founders designed the Senate specifically to prevent that. The Senate exists as a co-equal branch of government. It exists to ask hard questions, to challenge decisions, to force debate. When senators stop doing that, the system doesn't have guardrails anymore. And I don't care what party you belong to, that should worry you. Here's what I think happens next. The runoff is August 25th. Ralph Norman is her opponent. And he at least answered the Taiwan question with substance. He talked about the trade relationship, the chip supply chain, enabling Taiwan to defend itself. I don't agree with everything Norman said, and his comment about weak Democrats was the kind of partisan cheap shot that doesn't help anybody. But at least the man understood what he was being asked. If Graham wins the runoff, she faces Democrat Annie Andrews in November. Dr. Andrews is the pediatrician from South Carolina. And I'll tell you this, that general election just became a lot more interesting than people expected. Because South Carolina voters, regardless of party, are watching what happened last night and asking themselves a simple question. Do I want someone in the Senate who doesn't understand the most basic foreign policy questions facing this country? And that question is going to follow her. Every debate, every interview, every endorsement meeting, someone is going to ask her about Taiwan, about the South China Sea, about Iran, and she's going to have an answer. The question is whether the answer comes from genuine learning or from memorizing talking points her staff hands her. And voters can usually tell the difference. Let me close with this, because I think it's the most important thing I can say. I believe in the American people's ability to correct course. I've seen it happen in my lifetime over and over again. But course correction requires information. It requires voters who understand what's at stake, who know the details, who don't settle for surface-level coverage that tells them what to feel instead of what to know. And I worry that too many people right now are making decisions based on name recognition, based on endorsements, based on loyalty, when what we need are decisions based on competence, on preparation, on whether the person asking for your vote actually understands the weight of the office they're seeking. Darlene Graham seems like a decent person. She loved her brother. She's grieving. I have compassion for that. But compassion doesn't change the fact that a United States Senator needs to understand national security. That's not optional. That's not something you get to skip because it's not your thing. If you do one thing after watching this, do this. Go read the Bluebill newsletter. I recommend it more than anything else I could point you to right now. 5 minutes, that's all it takes. And it's going to help you understand what all of this actually means for your family, for your future, for the decisions being made in your name. You deserve to have that. Don't be the person who's always finding out last. Don't be the one sitting at the table just nodding along because cable gave you the headline but not the story. We can do better than this. We always have, but only when we demand it, and only when we know enough to know what we should be demanding.